It begins with silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that presses against your chest, the kind that tells you something is wrong even before you can name it. In North Korea, silence is survival. It's the first lesson every child learns before they even learn to read. Speak only when told. Listen when spoken to. Smile when watched. And always, always pretend. Pretend that the country is prosperous. Pretend that the leader is divine. Pretend that you are happy. But deep down, behind the thin walls of crumbling apartments where whispers hide between flickering lights, there is another truth. A truth that no one dares to say out loud, that leaving is death. And still some try. Imagine a winter night along the Yalu River. The air is frozen. The moon is a dull coin behind a veil of mist, and somewhere in the darkness, a figure moves slowly through the snow. It's a woman wrapped in layers of threadbare fabric, her breath clouding the air like smoke. She's been walking for hours, maybe days, heading north. Not south, not toward the DMZ lined with landmines and machine guns, but toward China. Her child clings to her back, asleep or unconscious, she can't tell anymore. Ahead lies the river, black and thin, half frozen, half alive. On the other side, the promise of something no one in North Korea is supposed to dream about. Freedom. Behind her, silence again, until the sound of boots cracks the night. Floodlights sweep across the frozen banks, and then the barking begins. In North Korea, the border is not a line. It's a wall made of fear, hunger, and loyalty. Crossing it is not simply illegal. It's treason, a sin against the very idea of the nation. The government calls defectors traitors to the bloodline. If you're caught, you're not the only one punished. Your parents, your children, your neighbors, they vanish too. It's called guilt by association. The regime doesn't just want to stop you from leaving. It wants to erase the thought that you ever existed. Because to them, a person who wants to leave has already committed the greatest crime. Disbelief. The woman on the river, let's call her Mi-sun, knows this. Everyone knows this. They hear the stories whispered through the black markets. The Jangmadang, where stolen Chinese radios hum faint signals from the outside world. They say that those who cross the river are sometimes caught and sent to labor camps, places with no names, only numbers. Yodok, Camp 15, Hwaryong, Kaichon. In these places, men and women dig holes until their hands bleed, and they eat corn husks and rats to survive. But even then, some believe it's better than staying. Because in North Korea, staying means living in slow motion, trapped in a play that never ends, where every smile is rehearsed and every word weighed for danger. Mi-sun's story is not unique. Every year, hundreds try to leave. Most through the northern border with China, a stretch of land carved by the Yalu and Tumen rivers. In summer, the waters are shallow, muddy, and watchful. In winter, they harden into mirrors of ice, where every step could crack the surface or your fate. The guards are not nameless soldiers. They are neighbors, classmates, sometimes even relatives, drafted and trained to shoot without hesitation. Some do, some don't. But hesitation in North Korea is also a crime. For those who succeed, the first breath of air on Chinese soil feels unreal. But the relief lasts only seconds. Because China does not recognize North Koreans as refugees. To Beijing, they are illegal migrants. And so the hunt continues, just under a different flag. Chinese police patrol border towns, looking for faces that don't belong. Local informants report suspicious strangers, and when they find them, they send them back across the river, back into the hands of the regime. What happens next is something no camera has ever shown. The state doesn't film its punishments. It erases them. Those caught trying to escape are interrogated first, not with questions, but with fists, boots, and cables. They are asked who helped them, who told them about the outside world, who gave them food. If they refuse to answer, the pain continues until they do. If they lie, they risk the lives of others. Some survive the interrogation, some don't. And those who do are sent to the camps. Officially, they are called re-education through labor. Unofficially, they are places of slow annihilation. Inside these camps, life is reduced to obedience and endurance. Prisoners wake before dawn, march into the fields, and return only after the sun dies behind the mountains. They are told they are being re-educated, But what they are really learning is submission, to hunger, to pain, to hopelessness. They sing songs to Kim Jong-un before meals, though there is rarely enough to eat. Guards remind them that their suffering is mercy, that they should be grateful they are being allowed to live at all, and so they bow and they sing and they break. But not all defectors are caught. Some vanish into China, finding work in factories or hiding in basements. Women often fall into the hands of traffickers who sell them as brides to poor farmers. Others are forced into prostitution. A few, through underground Christian networks, find their way to Mongolia, Laos, or Thailand, and from there, if they are lucky, to South Korea. But even in Seoul, freedom comes with ghosts. They carry the weight of what they saw, what they lost, and what they cannot forget. Some dream of returning one day to find their families. Most know they never will. Back inside North Korea, the regime turns every escape into propaganda. State news announces that traitors were captured, that they confessed to working for the CIA or South Korea. Their faces are blurred, their voices distorted, their humanity erased. The message is clear: there is no world outside this one worth living in. The regime calls it the most perfect nation. And yet, perfection demands walls. In Pyongyang, those walls aren't made of stone. They're made of privilege and illusion. While the borderlands starve, the capital shines with choreographed parades, and foreign diplomats shown model streets. Foreign visitors are driven through clean avenues, past buildings with lights that never go out, though most are powered by generators for the occasion. Behind the facade, people rehearse what to say if approached. They memorize approved phrases. We have everything we need. Our dear leader loves us. We are the happiest people in the world. Words like escape or freedom do not exist in their language in the way outsiders understand them. Children in schools learn about traitors who tried to flee. Their textbooks show pictures of families frozen in rivers, of spies disguised as refugees. They are told these people were weak, corrupted by foreign lies. They are told that true citizens never leave. And so the next generation grows up fearing the border not as a line, but as a curse. At night, when the city darkens except for the glow from the portrait of Kim Il-sung, the air carries a strange quiet. Somewhere far away, a woman like Mi-sun stands by the river again. Maybe she's younger, maybe older, maybe alone this time. She stares at the black water, knowing it could kill her. But the hunger behind her is worse. The beatings, the slogans, the endless obedience, worse still. And so she steps forward. One foot, then another. The ice creaks. The wind howls. Somewhere beyond the water there is a light. In North Korea, defection is both an act of courage and despair. It's not about politics or rebellion. It's about breath, about survival. Those who flee aren't dreaming of democracy or capitalism. They're dreaming of rice, of a bed without surveillance, of a night where the only sound is the wind, not the marching of soldiers. Still, the question remains, what happens to those who try and fail? Some disappear into camps for life. Others, especially women, are sent to revolutionary zones where they perform unpaid labor for years. If a defector is caught while pregnant after being trafficked in China, the punishment is worse. The child is often killed at birth, seen as impure, half foreign, half enemy. Mothers are beaten until they cannot scream anymore. For the guards, this is not cruelty, it's duty. They believe what they've been taught since childhood, that loyalty is purity, and purity must be protected. Many soldiers at the border cry in secret. Some have families who starved during the famine of the 1990s, the arduous march. They understand hunger, but understanding doesn't save them. They too live under surveillance. A single act of mercy could destroy their own family. Occasionally, a defector's story reaches the outside world. A South Korean journalist, a human rights organization, a smuggled phone recording. But even then, truth travels slowly, because every word must cross the same invisible border, the one built from fear and indifference. The regime knows this. That's why it invests not just in fences and guards, but in the erasure of empathy. When people outside stop caring, the walls grow higher, and so the cycle continues. Desperation, escape, capture, punishment. A few stories leak out. Most die in silence. But inside the country, beneath portraits and parades, whispers still spread. Someone saw the river last night. Someone heard the sound of footsteps in the snow. Someone said they made it. Hope, even in the darkest corner of the world, is contagious. In the morning, propaganda loudspeakers wake the towns again. Music plays. Slogans echo through empty streets. Children recite oaths of loyalty. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a question lingers in every mind, though no one will ever ask it aloud. If this country is paradise, why do so many try to leave? The regime doesn't answer. It doesn't need to. Its silence is the answer. It's in the empty homes, the missing neighbors, the endless funerals with no bodies. It's in the rivers that freeze every winter, hiding their secrets under the ice. It's in the faces of the guards who look away when someone disappears into the fog. It's in the sound of a mother whispering to her child, "Just one more night, and then we run." The truth is not written in North Korea's books or broadcast on its televisions. It's carried by those who cross the river and live to tell. Their stories don't shout, they whisper. And if you listen closely, beneath the layers of propaganda and silence, you can hear them. The sound of footsteps in the snow, the crack of ice, the breath of someone running toward a light they've never seen. What happens to people who try to leave North Korea? Most never make it. Some vanish. A few survive. But every single one of them, whether they escape or not, has already crossed a border long before they reach the river, the border between fear and hope. And that is the one border the regime can never truly guard. Before dawn, the streets of Hyeryong are still. A thin fog drifts between the concrete blocks, and the only light comes from a speaker pole humming with the voice of the leader. The sound moves through the air like smoke, soft, slow, omnipresent. It tells the citizens that their nation is strong, that their people are proud, that their enemies will fall. But behind shuttered windows, people aren't listening. They are counting. Counting rice grains, counting the days since their last letter from a missing son, counting the hours until the next inspection. In North Korea, every moment is measured by fear, and for some, that fear eventually becomes unbearable. They begin to count something else, the distance to the border. The idea of leaving doesn't begin suddenly. It grows slowly, like frost crawling over glass. It begins with hunger, then comes doubt. A whispered story, a smuggled film, a glimpse of life outside, a pair of jeans from China, a South Korean drama played in secret on a battery-powered DVD player, a photograph of Seoul, bright, alive, impossible. The mind begins to fracture. How could everything they've been told be a lie? How could their country, their sacred homeland, be a cage? And yet, when that question forms, it's already too late. Doubt is treason, curiosity is crime, and curiosity in this place kills not only the cat, it kills entire families. The watchers are everywhere. Every block has an inmin ban, a neighborhood watch unit led by a woman who knows every household, every visitor, every cough in the night. She is not an agent by choice. She is a citizen performing her duty, because failure to report suspicion means suspicion of her. Once a week, she gathers the women in her unit to review behavior, who didn't attend the latest rally, who failed to bow before the leader's portrait, who didn't sing loudly enough. Reports are written, signed, and passed upward. In the eyes of the regime, loyalty is not proven by belief, it's proven by surveillance. So when someone disappears, the absence doesn't go unnoticed. A missing person becomes an investigation. Soldiers visit the home. They search for signs of defection, packed clothes, burned papers, footprints near the river. Neighbors are questioned, relatives are summoned. The silence that follows is thicker than grief. It's fear solidified. No one dares to ask what happened. No one dares to remember. But some do remember. In secret. In the quiet spaces between fear. Take the story of Hyun-woo, a boy from Chongjin, whose father once served as a border guard. His father was proud, strict, the kind of man who polished his boots even after retirement. But one winter, the famine returned. The rations stopped. The state told citizens to eat less for the revolution, and Hyun-woo's father, like so many, began to lose faith. At night, he listened to a smuggled Chinese radio, its static whispering news of the outside world. One night, Hyunwoo woke to find his father gone. The next day, soldiers came for his mother. The boy never saw either of them again. He was told they were re-educated. Later, he learned what that really meant. His father had tried to cross the river. His mother had been punished for silence. He was sent to an orphanage for traitors' children. The orphanages are not places of learning. They are factories of obedience. Children are taught that love is conditional, that safety depends on loyalty. They sing songs about the leader as the sun, the air, the water. They recite oaths promising to fight against traitors, even if those traitors are their parents. The goal is not to raise children, it's to erase lineage, to scrub away the stain of doubt. Some of those children grow up to become guards, officials, soldiers. The system feeds itself generation after generation through fear disguised as devotion. Meanwhile, near the border, life takes on a different shape. The towns of Musan, Hisan, and Onsong are where hope and terror intersect. Smugglers trade Chinese goods for North Korean coal, copper, and herbs. Information slips through the cracks. A USB drive here, a cell phone there. South Korean dramas showing families eating freely, laughing, traveling abroad. For the first time, some North Koreans see ordinary people living without fear. The images are poison to the regime. They shatter the illusion of perfection. The Ministry of State Security calls them psychological weapons. Possession of one can mean years in a labor camp. And yet, despite the risk, the hunger for truth spreads. People begin to trade not only food, but stories. One woman whispers that her cousin made it to Thailand. Another says she heard her neighbor's son sends money from Seoul. Hope travels faster than fear, and that terrifies the regime. Because hope, once lit, cannot be extinguished, only punished. Those who are caught planning to defect face interrogation centers known as bawibu. They are small, dark, and designed to erase identity. Prisoners kneel for hours on the cold floor, hands bound behind their backs, staring at portraits of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. They are beaten until they confess to crimes they never committed. They are forced to memorize and repeat their guilt. I betrayed the love of the great leader. I failed to protect socialism. I am not worthy to live. The interrogators don't want truth. They want control. Confession is the only exit, even if it's a lie. Once the paperwork is complete, punishment begins. The most common sentence for defectors is forced labor. 10 years, 20, sometimes life. Entire families can be sent together. In the camps, the rules are simple. Work, obey, endure. Speaking without permission is a beating. Resting is a beating. Crying is a beating. Even dying without authorization is forbidden. Corpses are left outside until nightfall as reminders. The guards say they do this to teach the living. Some camps are larger than cities. Yodok, for example, spans over 200 square kilometers. It contains rice fields, mines, and workshops where prisoners produce uniforms and cement for the state. Every morning, loudspeakers announce quotas. Every evening, the same speakers praise the leader. The irony is merciless. Even in hell, propaganda never sleeps. Inside, people learn to forget time. They mark seasons not by calendars, but by the taste of the air. When snow melts into mud, when summer brings insects to eat. There is no past, only survival. And yet within this darkness, strange moments of humanity persist. Prisoners share a stolen radish. A mother hums a song to her child at night. A guard hesitates before striking. These fragments of compassion are dangerous. The regime fears them as much as rebellion because kindness breeds memory, and memory is the seed of resistance. Meanwhile, across the river in China, the story continues in secret. For every person who dies crossing, there is another who makes it. They hide in barns, churches, or safe houses run by underground networks. Some find help from Christian missionaries. Others are betrayed by traffickers. Chinese authorities often raid these shelters. When caught, refugees plead not to be sent back, but their cries are ignored. Diplomacy outweighs humanity. Beijing maintains its alliance with Pyongyang by returning defectors as economic migrants. What happens after repatriation is a story no government wants to acknowledge. Those returned face interrogation again, this time worse, because now they carry the disease of foreign thought. Women who are pregnant in China are often forced into abortions. Babies born are killed. their existence considered contamination. The mothers are told they are lucky to be spared execution. Men are sent to heavier labor, digging tunnels, breaking rocks, or mining coal in toxic conditions. Few last long. The lucky die quickly. The unlucky live long enough to wish they hadn't. And yet, despite all this, people still try to leave. They still run toward that faint horizon where the world might be different. Some do it for their children, some because of hunger, some because they once saw a flicker of light on the other side of the river and couldn't forget it. The human mind, once exposed to the possibility of freedom, becomes restless. Even the walls of the most powerful dictatorship cannot contain imagination forever. For those who make it to South Korea, the story doesn't end. It only changes shape. They enter a new kind of isolation. They are greeted by cameras, interviews, documentaries. They are asked to relive their trauma for proof. Many struggle with guilt. They left family behind. They dream of them at night, faces pressed against glass, reaching out. They speak different Korean now, softer, freer, but it feels foreign on their tongues. Some never adjust. Some return to the North voluntarily, believing they will be forgiven. None are. South Korea has a rehabilitation center for defectors called Hanawon, House of Unity. Inside, escapees are taught how to use ATMs, how to buy groceries, how to live in a world that doesn't watch them. Counselors teach them to speak without fear, to choose without consequence. It sounds simple, but for many it's terrifying. Freedom after a lifetime of control feels like vertigo. They tremble when asked for opinions. They apologize when they laugh. One woman described it as learning to breathe again. Still, even in freedom, they are haunted. Many suffer from nightmares, depression, paranoia. They check for listening devices in their apartments. They avoid talking to strangers. Some receive mysterious calls from North Korean agents threatening their families. The regime's reach extends far beyond its borders. Its power isn't limited to geography. It's psychological. It turns memory into chains. And yet, among those who escaped, there are also voices of defiance. They tell their stories, sometimes in documentaries, sometimes in books, sometimes anonymously online. They become witnesses. Their testimonies reveal what the regime hides, that beyond the parades and the propaganda lies a country held together by fear, hunger, and grief. Each defector's voice is a crack in the wall, a reminder that truth, no matter how small, can spread. Still, the danger remains. The Ministry of State Security tracks these voices. Families left behind are punished for the words of those who fled. Brothers are demoted. Mothers are expelled from the party. Fathers vanish. The message is clear: speak, and your loved ones pay the price. For many, silence becomes the last act of love. This is how the regime survives, not just through control, but through the weaponization of love itself. It turns affection into weakness, empathy into risk. To protect someone, you must forget them. To survive, you must stop caring. That is the real tragedy of North Korea. Not only what it takes from its people, but what it forces them to surrender, their humanity. And yet the border remains alive. Every winter, new footprints appear on the snow. Every summer, new ripples disturb the Black River. The guards still patrol, the dogs still bark, and in the distance, a child still dreams of a world where people can walk without fear of vanishing. Because even in the darkest night, a single whisper can carry. It moves through the cold air, crosses rivers, passes mountains. It reaches those who listen, and when it does, it carries a simple message, not shouted, not written, but felt, that even in a nation built on silence, the human spirit refuses to stay quiet forever. It begins again with footsteps, soft, deliberate, almost soundless. Somewhere in the mountains near Hisan, under a sky without stars, a man and his daughter move through the dark. They don't speak. They can't. Every word could be the sound that ends them. The girl's hand trembles inside her father's palm, but he squeezes once, silently, the way he used to when she was small and frightened of thunder. The same gesture, but this time the thunder comes from soldiers. In North Korea, freedom begins in silence and often ends in gunfire. The man's name is June. He once worked in a factory that no longer exists. Like many in the North, His job disappeared during the famine of the 1990s, the arduous march, when millions starved and the government called it a temporary food shortage. He buried his wife in that famine, wrapped in rags and snow. Years later, he sold his last possessions for rice, but rice turned to ash in the hands of a hungry man. So now he walks with his daughter toward the river that separates them from China. Ahead is a chance, a dangerous one, but a chance nonetheless. Behind is nothing but hunger and ghosts. The mountains are quiet, but not empty. Every slope hides soldiers. Every path is mapped. Yet still people move. They know where patrols change shifts, where fences sag, where bribes work. These maps are drawn in memory and whispered through networks of desperation. Smugglers act as guides, though some are liars, leading refugees straight into traps. Others are worse, selling them across the river to traffickers. Hope in North Korea has a price, and it's often paid in flesh. June knows this. He's seen it happen before. He's also seen what happens to those who are caught. Public executions are not hidden. They are warnings. People are gathered in schoolyards or open fields, made to watch as traitors are shot by firing squads. Sometimes the crimes are petty, stealing grain, possessing a Bible, listening to a South Korean song. Other times they are larger, attempting to escape, harboring defectors, spreading rumors about the outside world. The bodies are left for hours, flies circling in the air thick with silence. Children are told to remember what betrayal looks like, but betrayal is a matter of perspective. In Pyongyang's official history, the country's citizens are chosen by destiny, born under the protective gaze of the Kim bloodline. The border is sacred not to keep people out, but to keep purity in. The propaganda says that beyond the border lies corruption, disease, and moral decay, and yet, in the markets, people whisper about the things that lie beyond. Lights that never go out, stores that never close, families who eat meat every day. Each rumor is a spark against the dark wall of control. The government knows this too. That's why it floods border towns with slogans, cameras, and fear. Posters warn against human scum who defect. Students are taught that spies and missionaries lure citizens with fake promises. The state sponsors confession days, where people must admit to impure thoughts or report the disloyal behavior of others. Those who fail to participate are marked. The most dangerous thing in North Korea isn't rebellion, it's remembering who you are. By the river, June hesitates. The water glimmers faintly, frozen at the edges. Across it, faint lights flicker from Chinese villages. He can see them, yellow and unreal, like stars that have come too close. His daughter looks up at him. "Appa," she whispers. He doesn't answer. He can't. He takes her hand, steps onto the ice, and listens to the world hold its breath. Behind them, another story unfolds. In Pyongyang, far from the border, a university student named Yun-ha sits in a small library, pretending to study. The power has gone out again, but she doesn't need light to think. She's been reading a book hidden inside another, a foreign novel smuggled in by a relative from the north. The words speak of cities with glass towers, people who choose their leaders, lives not dictated by portraits. She reads slowly, afraid the paper itself might betray her heartbeat. Her father works for the party. Her family is watched. She should not know that another world exists, and yet she knows. That knowledge is a crime in itself. When the librarian approaches, Yunha quickly hides the pages beneath her notes. The woman smiles mechanically, glancing at the portraits of the leaders above. Her smile is not kindness, it's survival. Everyone here performs loyalty like theater, each gesture rehearsed, and Yunha plays her part well until the day her brother disappears. He was caught watching a South Korean film, a love story about two teenagers who escaped to the city. He had borrowed the DVD from a classmate who had a Chinese phone. The arrest was quick, public, and absolute. Her father never spoke his name again. At home, his photographs vanished overnight. At dinner, the family bowed before the portraits, as always, but the silence afterward was heavier than prayer. Yunha learned what all North Koreans eventually learn, that memory is forbidden when it contradicts devotion. The regime doesn't erase history, it erases the people who carry it. And so she walks the city like a ghost, smiling when expected, crying only when alone. Somewhere deep down, she wonders if her brother made it past the border, if he's alive, if the stories of freedom are true. Meanwhile, in a camp not far from Pyeongsan, prisoners dig through frozen soil with bare hands. The ground is too hard for shovels, too cold for mercy. They work until their skin cracks, until the guards whistle, until the day ends without sunset. One man collapses, another takes his place. There are no names here, only numbers. The prisoners whisper among themselves about people who escaped, the ones who vanished into the mountains, who reached the border, who were said to be living in Seoul. The whispers are dangerous, but they're all that keep them alive. A guard named Kang listens sometimes. He's young, barely 23, born into a military family, raised on stories of enemy spies and eternal loyalty, yet even he feels the dissonance. He remembers his mother, thin and quiet, trading stolen potatoes to keep them alive during the famine. The party had called those years the march toward victory. He had called it hunger. Now, as he watches prisoners starve, he feels that old hunger return, not for food but for truth. Still, he doesn't act. He stands at his post repeating slogans, hiding his doubts under layers of uniform and obedience. And this is how the system sustains itself, not through belief but through exhaustion. Everyone is afraid, everyone is hungry, everyone is pretending. It's a theater where the audience and the actors are the same. Even the soldiers are prisoners, bound by invisible chains. Across the border, defectors live in limbo. In Chinese towns, they sleep in barns and factories, always listening for footsteps. Some find work under false names, others are hidden by underground churches. Every knock on the door could mean discovery. Every sunrise could be their last in freedom. The Chinese government calls this policy cooperation. The North calls it justice, and the rest of the world calls it diplomacy. Occasionally, one of these defectors reaches South Korea. When they do, they bring fragments of stories, smuggled memories. A girl describing the smell of coal dust in her school, a man explaining how prisoners were forced to sing hymns before beatings, a mother recalling how her baby was taken from her because he was born in China. Each story is unbearable on its own. Together, they form a portrait of a nation built on silence. The outside world listens sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't. The news cycles turn and the stories fade. But for those who lived them, time never moves on. It stays frozen like the rivers they once crossed. Back on that same river, the ice groans beneath June's feet. The lights of China glimmer closer now, but so do the voices of the patrol. He tells his daughter not to move, though his own body is shaking. The barking grows louder. A spotlight flares, cutting through the fog. For one moment, he sees both worlds, the black of the river beneath him, the white of the snow ahead. He lifts his daughter and runs. The ice cracks. Somewhere behind, a gunshot echoes. In Pyongyang, a loudspeaker declares that a traitor was captured near the border last night. The citizens bow their heads as the announcement continues. Another enemy of the revolution destroyed. Another proof of the leader's vigilance. No one speaks, no one looks up. But somewhere someone flinches, and far away, in the quiet of a Seoul apartment, a woman hears the news through an illegal broadcast and begins to cry. She doesn't know the man's name. She never will. But she recognizes the silence that follows, the same silence she once fled. Because in North Korea, silence is the sound of a nation bleeding in secret, and for every person who tries to leave, the echo of that silence reaches farther than any wall, any river, any border ever built to keep them in. Morning in Pyongyang arrives not with sunlight, but with orders. The loudspeakers begin before dawn, flooding every home, every street, every corner of the capital with the same phrases repeated for generations. Citizens rise in rhythm to the voice of the leader, brushing teeth to propaganda songs, dressing in uniforms that match their neighbors, walking in lines that feel like destiny. Yet beneath this choreography, there is something fragile, something unspeakable. It is the quiet knowledge that the world outside exists, and that it is forbidden. To live in North Korea is to live inside a performance where truth is rehearsed daily. The actors never leave the stage, Even thoughts are monitored, faces watched for signs of disloyalty. Cameras watch, neighbors report, and words become dangerous currency. The people do not dream of rebellion. They dream of permission. Permission to feel, to ask, to know. But the regime's greatest weapon isn't violence, it's isolation. It cuts every line between reality and possibility until people forget there ever was another way to live. And yet cracks appear, they always do. It starts with whispers carried by traders returning from the borderlands. They speak of lights in Chinese cities that never go out, of markets filled with meat, of citizens owning phones. The listeners act unimpressed, even disgusted. But later, in private, they ask quietly, how bright were the lights? How much meat? How free were the people? And just like that, the forbidden thought begins to breathe. For those in Pyongyang, leaving is nearly impossible. The capital is both privilege and prison. Citizens are screened, loyal families chosen to live there as proof that socialism works. Every ration, every assignment, every conversation is monitored. But there is one truth they can never entirely suppress: curiosity. A young engineer studying the electric grid once found a way to catch Chinese radio waves on his homemade receiver. He listened at night, hidden under a blanket, hearing unfamiliar voices speak of weather reports, traffic jams, music, ordinary things. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. It was free. He was caught 3 weeks later. His family was reassigned to a rural province. No one ever mentioned his name again. In the countryside, hunger writes its own history. Children search for edible weeds. Families boil grass. People whisper about relatives who left and disappeared, which means they either died on the river or survived somewhere far away. Sometimes smuggled money returns, a few yuan hidden in packages, proof that someone made it. Those small amounts can mean survival, but they also mean danger. Accepting outside money is a crime. To feed your family is treason if it undermines control. The regime's surveillance extends even to emotion. Weddings must include official portraits. Funerals must praise the leaders before mourning the dead. Love itself is conditional, a feeling to be redirected toward the state. Soldiers marry women from loyal families. Farmers must seek permission to wed. Even affection is regulated, because affection creates loyalty outside the party, and that is something the regime cannot allow. For those who defected and now live in freedom, these memories become haunting. They describe the first time they saw the sky without limits, the first time they chose what to eat, the first time they laughed without looking over their shoulder. And yet, many say it was not joy they felt first, but guilt. They had survived something others did not. They had crossed the river, but part of them never left. They call it the invisible border, the one that lives inside their minds. In Seoul, a defector named Suk Jin keeps a photograph on her wall. It shows her mother standing outside their old home in North Hamgyong province, smiling in the faded sunlight. She looks alive, though she hasn't been seen in over 10 years. Suk Jin doesn't know if her mother was punished for her escape. She assumes she was. Most defectors do. It is the unspoken price of survival. You live, and the people you love disappear. Still, she speaks. She joins meetings of other defectors, giving testimony to international groups. She tells them about the camps, the hunger, the silence. She knows her words won't bring her family back, but she speaks because silence is what the regime feeds on. She once said, "If I stop talking, they win twice." Across the border, deep inside North Korea, new camps are being built. The government denies their existence, calling them reform facilities. The satellite images tell another story: expanding perimeters, fresh trenches, new watchtowers. Human rights groups estimate that over 100,000 people live and die in these camps, though no one really knows. Numbers are meaningless when names are erased. The punishments change, but the logic remains constant. Control through terror, faith through fear. The same cycle, repeated for 70 years. Every generation is taught to worship the same family, to fear the same outside world. Yet the cracks keep spreading. Smuggled smartphones allow glimpses of South Korean pop culture. Foreign USB drives circulate through black markets. Children hum forbidden melodies without knowing where they came from. The government responds with raids, purges, executions, but technology is harder to kill than people. In the city of Hyesan, a young woman named Mina once filmed the markets with a hidden camera. The footage showed people trading, laughing, living ordinary lives outside state control. It was smuggled to the south and aired by foreign broadcasters. Days later, her family vanished. Her name was never mentioned again. But her film survived. It became one of the few moving images of daily life in North Korea, proof that reality was more complex than the propaganda suggested. For every image the state destroys, another escapes. Truth, like water, always finds a crack, and yet the cost remains unbearable. Entire villages vanish overnight after an escape attempt. Students are pulled from schools, families reassigned, homes burned. The regime calls it cleansing the bloodline. In a society built on collective punishment, there are no individuals, only examples. Still, the rivers keep freezing in winter, and every year more footprints appear along their banks. For each person caught, another tries. It's not courage exactly, it's necessity. Hunger doesn't negotiate with fear. Parents whisper to their children, "We'll go soon when the guards change." They don't tell them what lies ahead, only that it must be better than what's behind. And for some, it is. Those who reach freedom often become voices of testimony. They appear on screens, at conferences, in classrooms, faces shaped by survival, voices trembling but steady. They speak not for fame, but for memory. Because in a nation where forgetting is policy, remembering is rebellion. Still, the world listens briefly, then moves on. Headlines fade, attention shifts. North Korea remains behind its curtain, unchanged yet constantly collapsing inward. The river keeps flowing, the camps keep expanding. The silence keeps thickening. But even silence can fracture. Sometimes it happens in the smallest ways. A child humming a band song, a soldier hesitating before pulling a trigger, a woman hiding food for a stranger. These moments don't make news, but they matter. They are the quiet rebellions that keep humanity alive in a place designed to erase it. And so every night when the lights of Pyongyang flicker and the loudspeakers fall quiet, there is a moment, a brief, fragile pause, when the country exhales. In that breath you can almost hear them, the ones who crossed, the ones who vanished, the ones who are still waiting by the river. Their voices merge into one long echo, carried by the wind over mountains and ice. It says only this: freedom is not a place. It's a heartbeat that refuses to stop, even when the world is silent. Inside the borders of North Korea, that heartbeat still exists, hidden, quiet, unbroken. Night settles differently over North Korea. It's not darkness, it's erasure. The sky folds itself into silence, swallowing the city's whole, and only the faintest glimmers of light survive. A lantern in a guard tower, a candle in a soldier's home, a fading bulb over a portrait of the leader. Beyond the walls of Pyongyang, the country disappears into black. Seen from space, it's a void surrounded by brightness. China on one side, South Korea on the other, and in between, a land that pretends not to exist. But the darkness is alive. It breathes in the whispers that travel across the border at night. It listens to the footsteps of smugglers, the prayers of defectors hiding in mountains, the soft thud of a child's hand pressing against frozen glass. For those still inside, the night is both enemy and ally. It hides them. It also tests them. In a small village near the Tumen River, a woman named Soyeon prepares to leave. She's 38, a mother of 2, and she's waited years for this night. Her husband died in a mine explosion, his death declared heroic labor. The medal she received could not feed her children. When famine returned, she began trading in the black market. Corn for soap, fabric for rice. Then one day, she met a man who whispered that he knew a way out. The price was everything she owned. She agreed without hesitation. The escape routes are rivers of shadows shifting constantly. One week it's a frozen crossing near Hisan. The next, it's through a smuggler's tunnel or a fishing boat headed north to Russian waters. None are safe. Many are traps. The border guards are rewarded for captures, punished for negligence. Still, even the guards sometimes look away, for a price or for mercy. A few remember their own hunger and choose silence. Those moments of hesitation are the cracks through which entire lives slip. As So-yeon crosses the river, her breath fogs in the cold. Each step on the ice sounds like a secret cracking open. The water moves beneath her, whispering warnings. Behind her, the shore fades into shadow. Ahead, the faint shimmer of the Chinese side. When she finally reaches it, she falls to her knees, not from joy but disbelief. The silence feels different here, lighter. But it doesn't last. Within hours, she's caught by Chinese police and sent to a detention center. The cells are small, the air heavy with fear. Around her are others, men, women, children, all captured after crossing. They know what comes next. The Chinese authorities will hand them back to North Korea. The guards call it repatriation. The prisoners call it a death sentence. Some beg, some pray. Some press their faces against the bars, hoping for one last breath of free air. So-yeon says nothing. She has seen enough to know that silence here, too, is survival. Days later, they are placed in trucks and driven back across the border. At customs, they are greeted not by officials but by soldiers from the Ministry of State Security. The men wear black gloves and carry notebooks. Each defector is questioned separately. Who helped you? Who else crossed? Did you meet missionaries? Did you see South Koreans? The interrogations last hours, sometimes days. The answers don't matter. The guilt is predetermined. For those sent to re-education camps, life becomes a loop of obedience. Morning drills, ideological lectures, forced labor. Prisoners must memorize the teachings of Kim Jong-un, reciting them until they can speak without thought. They are told they are being purified. Punishment is not about justice, it's about ritual humiliation. It breaks the body to control the mind. Some prisoners never return. Those who do are changed beyond recognition. They speak in rehearsed tones, eyes dulled by exhaustion. Their families are forced to welcome them home with parades of loyalty. The neighbors bow. The party records the event as successful reformation. And the cycle begins again. The cruelty of the regime lies not in its brutality alone, but in its precision. Every act of mercy is calculated, every punishment documented. Even death serves a function. Public executions are held at the end of workdays, near fields or factories, to remind citizens that fatigue is no excuse for disobedience. The condemned are tied to poles. Their crimes are read aloud. Sometimes the crowd is made to shout approval. The soldiers aim at the heart 3 times. The sound echoes through the mountains, carried by the wind long after the crowd disperses. In villages, people pretend not to remember, but they do. The memory burrows deep, reshaping them. A boy who watched his neighbor die grows up to become a soldier. A mother who cheered out of fear teaches her daughter never to speak her mind. Generations pass, and fear becomes heritage. Still, there are those who refuse to forget. Among defectors in the South, a small group runs a network that smuggles information back into the North. They send USB drives packed with news broadcasts, documentaries, even simple recordings of everyday life, grocery stores, concerts, traffic jams. They call their project Light in the Darkness. Each device that crosses the border is a spark, a reminder that another world exists. The regime tries to stop them with jammers and raids, but truth travels differently than propaganda. It hides in curiosity, in laughter, in songs hummed under breath. One such recording, a South Korean pop song, once reached a teenage girl in Hamhung. She played it at night, the volume so low she could barely hear it. The melody was soft, foreign, filled with a kind of longing she didn't understand. Later, when she was caught, the interrogators demanded to know what she heard. She said she didn't remember, but she did. She remembered every note. Music, like truth, lingers even when forbidden. In Pyongyang, the illusion of perfection continues. Foreign visitors are taken on curated tours, gleaming subway stations, model schools, immaculate apartments. Smiling guides repeat the same lines: "Our people are happy, our country is strong." The tourists see what they're meant to see. They leave believing half-truths, unaware that entire neighborhoods were cleared to create the illusion. Behind every clean street is a hidden one, where the air smells of coal and silence. The regime survives on spectacle. It must always perform strength. Parades of soldiers march in perfect rhythm, tanks rumbling past as the leader watches from his balcony. The citizens cheer until their throats ache. On television, announcers cry tears of joy at his presence. Every broadcast is a sermon, every image a shrine. The country calls it devotion. The world calls it delusion. But to those living it, it's survival. And yet, for all its power, the regime fears one thing above all: memory. That is why it hunts defectors who speak abroad. Agents track them in South Korea, China, even Europe. Some disappear under mysterious circumstances. Some receive phone calls warning them to stay silent. The message is clear. The border may be physical, but the reach of fear is infinite. Even so, defectors keep speaking. They tell their stories not out of vengeance, but out of duty, to those who can't. They talk about the ones left behind, the ones whose names will never be known. They talk about the rivers that carry more than water, rivers that hold the memory of footsteps, screams, hope. Because in the end, that is what happens to those who try to leave North Korea. They don't vanish. They transform into echoes, into memories that refuse to be buried, into fragments of truth that drift across borders, carried by wind, by water, by time itself. And sometimes, when the night is quiet enough, you can almost hear them. The footsteps on ice, the whispers of prayer, the steady heartbeat of a people who still dare to dream of light. Even in the darkest place on earth, that dream never dies.